Hi, and welcome to a new episode on the Rifleman's Corner. Today we're going to take a look at the Stgw 90, how we use it in service, and how you can turn your semi-automatic PE90 into a clone correct rifle. Of course, unfortunately, without actually turning it full auto. But since it's nice and cold outside, let's start with a short overview. The Stgw 90 is the current standard issue assault rifle of the Swiss military and has been since now over 30 years. It is a 5.56 assault rifle utilizing a long stroke gas piston system similar to the AK gas system. It has an overall length of 1 meter. 528 millimeters of that is the barrel length. That's right around 20 inches in imperial. The weight of the rifle is right around 4.3 kilograms in this configuration, which is right around 9.5 pounds. In service, it is used with a fixed length folding stock, 20 round magazines, and a fixed length non-adjustable folding bipod. If you want to clone a Stgw 90 with your semi-automatic PE90, there are, in my opinion, two major approaches you can take, or two guns that you can clone. One would be a personal rifle, meaning a rifle that service members take into possession, one they get issued and that they take home with them in between service, and once they have done all the days that they can actually purchase from the government and then just keep it at home. Of course, at that point the rifle will be modified to semi-automatic only. The other option would be to make what I call a core rifle, meaning a rifle that stays with a training unit, with a school, that's being used for just training, that may be force and force training usually, or other types of drills that would require a beater rifle. In order to clone a personal rifle, there are several steps that you can take. Those are relatively simple and easy to do, so let's start with those. Now, the first step you can take to clone a personal rifle would be to prep the sights. The sights are an HK style drum sight with some improvements to them. The front sight, we don't have to do anything on that. It's just a hooded front sight with a flip up night sight. The rear sight is an HK style drum, which is both windage and elevation adjustable. It has 4 positions. The first position would be the 100 meter rear notch sight, an open notch. And in addition, there are the glowing dots for the night sights. We have a 200 meter diopter, a 300 meter diopter, and a 400 meter diopter. Now, the 400 meter diopter is a little bit special. First off, we have 2 markings there. The white 4, of course, for 400 meters, and then the red 3. The red 3 is meant for if you want to use the rifle as a target rifle on 300 meters target ranges. You can use that sight setting if you want to use a 6 o'clock holds. Exactly. Now, what's also special about this position is that we have a screw insert. That screw insert basically just brings the rear sight, the diopter, to the proper size. Now, what we do to prep the sight is you take a screwdriver or a pocket knife from the inside of the diopter, you screw out that insert. Once you have that, you take it out and you are left with a big hole. The center of the hole is still at the same position, meaning if you take a proper sight picture, you are still aiming at a 400 meter position. Now, with the insert, what will you do with that so you don't lose it? You can open up the stock. You can again take your pocket knife, you push in the stock button, the latch, twist it counterclockwise, and then it will come out. Open up and come out. We have a spring in there. You can drop your insert into the spring and close everything back up. That way, if you really would need the insert for anything, you would still have it on hand, but you also won't lose it. Now, why would we use that ghost ring? The idea behind that is in bad lighting conditions or in close combat, just to see more stuff, we would try to use that. And it will kind of end up similar to an AK battle sight, where the rearmost position on the AK rear sight is also zeroed at 400 meters, and the idea would be to aim at the belt buckle. We were just never taught that in service properly, that it is this belt buckle hold out to 400 meters. So what I did as a platoon leader, I told my guys, hey, for everything, use the 200 meter sight. The 100-meter open notch is kind of impractical to use. It's kind of difficult to line up because the front sight is so much smaller than the rear sight, than the rear notch. So in the flight path of 5.56, I have a 20-inch barrel, super short, super flat. So I just told my guys, use the 200-meter sight, and then when we would qualify on the 300-meter range, we would use, of course, the sight setting number 3. We would basically never shoot past 300 meters anyway with iron sights, so having a large ghost ring there didn't bother anyone, so we just left it like that. The next step you can take to clone a personal rifle would be to get the sling set up right. What does that consist of? First off, we have the carry strap itself. That's what we are being issued with. It has on both ends an open hook. It's kind of like an HK hook, just without the locking latch. It has a adjustable buckle and a little spring clip that you can take from the sling to make rough adjustments. The first thing you'll do is you take that and sling it on the rifle. We have 2 sling loops, one by the diopter side, by the rear diopter side, and one by the front side. We sling that on there, make sure that the spring clip is all the way extended at the end of the sling, and make sure that that part of the sling is on the front side post and the other one at the rear side. Make sure that you mount it in a way that the opening of the hooks are facing downwards. Once you have done that, you can fold the stock, sling it across your chest. What you will do is you will adjust the length of the sling like that with the large buckle, that when you let the rifle go, the muzzle of the rifle is roughly at the same height as your eyes. That's what we do in service to make sure that we have some sort of sling relatively quickly available to us in case we have to use it for parade stuff where we have it slung across our chest. Now, of course, obviously, we can't use the sling for anything else than like shouldering the rifle or anything, so we can't use it like a modern shooting sling. But obviously, we need to do that as well. So what do? We extend the sling. We do that generally by 2 loops out of paracord. Generally, you have a shorter one in the rear and a longer one in the front. The exact length is really depending on your body. What do you wear underneath the sling? Be that plate carrier, large ballistic vest, just a chest rig, really depends. Now what we do is we take the shorter loop and we loop it around the upper part of the stock. Then we make another loop and we hook in our sling. Why do we make a second loop and don't just hook it in? They are open hooks, we can close them up. So instead of just having to wrap them into duct tape or whatever, if you make a second loop, the paracord gets thick enough, there's enough mass that it's really difficult for it to slip off the hook. The same thing we do at the front sling swivel with the longer one. Now, if you want to get into the weeds of cloning a rifle, there's also an option to add this to your sling setup. This little piece of rubber, that's basically just a rubber string in the form of an 8 and clamped together with a metal clamp. You basically turn this carry strap into an improvised bungee sling. How useful is that really? That's debatable. The idea behind it is that if you carry it on your body, slung across you for a long period of time, with every step on a long march, you get little impacts on your shoulder and neck area with the whole weight of the rifle hanging on there. So that could alleviate that a little bit by just dampening the impacts a little bit, giving the sling just a little bit of flex. What is that piece of rubber called? In service, we generally call it Gewehrgummi, which means rifle rubber, or Grenadier Gummi. Who are the Grenadiers? The Grenadiers are one of the 2 militia units in the special forces of the Swiss military. They actually started with that, as far as I'm aware of, in the early 2000s, before their short SIG 553s, their Sturmgewehr 07s really were available enough to them, or before they were introduced, they were still using the Stgw 90. And they started doing that for the reason of exactly creating a improvised bungee sling. After they, of course, got their shoulder rifles, they came with their own slings, Kastinger slings. So that thing basically went the way of the dodo for them. In other units, you see them very rarely, actually. It really depends on where and when you did your recruit school. I, in 2015, actually got those issued. In our recruit school, we got those. But other than that, after I was done, I never saw them again with other schools, with repetition course units. They just weren't the thing. I kept mine, of course, because it's a, kind of handy. So if you want to clone a early 2000s Grenadier rifle, that's definitely something you can do. Now with the sling extended both in the rear and in the front, we can actually use it in a proper manner, unfortunately with a fixed length, but at least we can sling it across our body as you're supposed to nowadays. And at the same time, if you have to do parade service, if you want to do that, you can still get rid of the loops, hook it in, and you're ready to go. Another very simple step you can take to make a clone correct rifle is the magazines that you use. In service are only the 20 round magazines. You get issued with one magazine. When you get the rifle, that's the magazine you take home with you. That's the one you keep with the rifle. That's the one you basically do everything with. And then if you have exercises, live fire exercises, force on force stuff, whatever, every school or every unit has satchels full of magazines. When you need more magazines for exercises, for training, whatever, they hand those satchels out and you can use as many magazines as you need. Now, as you can see, there are locking tabs on those magazines, meaning we can couple them together. We usually couple two magazines together and use them like that, just having in pairs of two. That way you have 40 rounds on the rifle with a relatively fast reload, and we don't have to fumble around with single 20 round magazines. We just grab 40 rounds at a time. Now 30 round magazines are technically in service, but not for the Stgw 90. 30 round magazines are only used officially with the shoulder rifles of the special forces. The magazines that are used with those rifles, those are core rifles, they stay with the units. And I believe they are issued 7 magazines in a case, if I'm not mistaken. What they're being issued are the classic clear polymer mags without the locking tabs. Now sometimes you do see videos or pictures of service members using 30 round magazines with a Stgw 90, with a long rifle. Now those are always private purchase magazines, and it really depends from unit to unit if they can use it in active service or if it's a training exercise with a military association, with a service association in their free time. Those are generally relatively lenient, where you can bring your own stuff. In service, it really depends from unit to unit. Some say, yeah, magazines, bring your own, whatever, we don't care. Some units are really strict. If it's a short rifle, then 30 round magazines. If it's a long rifle, 20 round magazines, or private purchase 30 rounders if the unit allows it. Having gone over the magazines, the next thing you can do to clone a personal rifle is to put a Stripperclip guide into the pistol grip. The Stripperclip guide fits perfectly into the hollow part of a pistol grip with a little polymer cap here. Those are sometimes stiff to open up, so they have little serrations there. If it's really hard to open yours up, you can take your pocket knife, put it in those serrations and use it kind of as a lever to push them open. Now, especially when it's colder, it's even harder to get them up, so I'll just leave it closed, but you can open that up, put a Stripperclip guide in there and close it back up. Now there's one final step you can take to clone a personal rifle, and that is to get one of the new charging handles. Those are extremely difficult to get, because what the military started doing is, because of some issues with the regular charging handle, when they break, they started to replace those broken charging handles with the new ones. Now the old charging handles, that's a relatively well-known issue. They have like a two-piece construction. We have the charging handle itself and then this rubber cover. Those rubber covers if they get old and a little brittle, they have a tendency to break off on the use. It's not a huge issue, it's just when they break off, it's relatively uncomfortable. The metal underneath is quite sharp, it has a few edges. Another issue with the older charging handle is their angle. They have a relatively upswept angle to them. If you want to put your own optic on there, then it becomes an issue, because the rail itself is wider than the base of the scope mount of the issued scope, and modern optics are generally much thicker than that scope from the 70s. So it's very likely that if you use that charging handle, you bump your knuckles into the optic while you're trying to manipulate the charging handles. If you're lucky and somehow you get your hands on a new one, on one of the full metal ones, then you can just put that in. What's the difference? It still has an angle, but it's not quite as extreme as before, and it's now one solid piece. So you don't have that rubber cover anymore that can break off. Now it's just a smoothed off single piece charging handle. Much more durable and much more comfortable if you have your own optics on there. That's not mine. I know a guy who had one. A buddy of mine got his replaced, got one of the new ones, and actually borrowed it to me. So, Schmockel, merci vielmals. I was able to show that to you guys. So, those have been all the modifications you can do to your PE90 to turn it into a clone of a personal Stgw 90. The other option, as I mentioned before, would be to clone a core rifle. Again, a core rifle is a rifle that stays with a training base or a training unit that doesn't go home with the soldier. There isn't one fixed pattern to the rifle, but there are some very common modifications that you see on a lot of them. And that's what we will go over. Now, again, some of those modifications are not only on core rifles. Some of that stuff is kit that you get handed out, that you can also mount to a personal rifle, but that you have to return once you're done with training. So I generally put that on the category of a core rifle. So let's set up this rifle into a core rifle and go over it. Now that the sun is coming over the hilltops, we can take a look at the core rifle and how they would look like. First off, let's start with the handguard and the weapon light. The weapon lights are core material, meaning if you need it, you can order it, it gets issued out to you, and once you're done using them, you have to return them at the end of your training. I got my hands on an actual issued handguard, could borrow that from a friend of mine. Now the light itself and the mount of the switch is not issued, that's his personal stuff, but I'm not going to remove it just for this video. The weapon light set comes in a little case. In that case is the handguard, the weapon light itself. Generally what's been issued is an older model of the Surefire Scout light, 600 series. The exact model of the head I'm not entirely sure of. It comes with both the clicky tail cap and the remote switch. The remote switch generally is mounted to the handguard with a piece of Velcro, so that's just Velcroed on. And then depending on when you get it and with what handguard, you got different kinds of cable management and rail covers. But that really depends on when you got the weapon light issued to you. There are several different kinds of both handguards and rail covers. The handguard itself is actually really simple to clone as well. There are basically just two pieces of Picatinny rail screwed through the upper handguard. The length of those handguards can vary. The one we have here, which I call the middle length, that is an older version. That's the one I was issued in 2015. Then there is a shorter version that's roughly like that long. That was very common in use with core rifles in the training base of Wallenstadt. Nowadays there's an even longer version that's roughly going to right around here. Those have been issued together with the new laser light module, but it's the same principle. It's just two pieces of rail just screwed into the handguard. There's nothing fancy about them. Now for a weapon light, obviously no issue at all. That works perfectly fine. It just looks a little weird. For a laser light module, that's a little bit a different story. The handguard is not super thin. I'm not very confident in the capability of a array like that to hold 0. Since that's what we are issued, that's what we have to use. The next part you can do to clone a core rifle would be the folding and collapsing stock. That's something I especially saw with all the core rifles from Wallenstadt. All of those core rifles had the folding and collapsing stock of the shorter Stgw 07, the SG550s. It's certainly something that's quite welcome, especially if you have to wear those big, thick ballistic vests that are currently still being issued and that are now being replaced by the new plate carrier system. The stock itself is not bad. It's a folding collapsing stock. It has 3 positions, a long one, a short one, and a medium one. I generally have it on the medium position. It's just the most comfortable for me. But I'm honestly not the biggest fan of that stock, especially depending on from stock to stock. It's possible that if you really push hard into the stock, if you push the rifle into a barricade or something, that on the recoil the stock can collapse on you. It's not a huge issue. If that would happen with your stock, you can wrap some duct tape around the stem of the stock here where it goes into the locking collar. It's not a huge issue. That will just give a little bit more friction to prevent it from collapsing. It just bothers me. The regular stock is fine. The fixed length stock for me with a plate carrier, with a modern plate carrier, is the ideal length. On the other hand, if I would have to use this big, thick issued vest, that's definitely something that can help. Or if you want to get really into the weeds of cloning a core rifle, that's an option for you. One of the last things you can do to clone a core rifle would be to replace the sling. Again, that's something I have seen with the rifles in Wallenstadt, with the core rifles. Instead of the personal sling, what they have mounted are Stgw 04 rifle slings from Kastinger. Those are generally being mounted to the Stgw 07s, to the SG550s of Special Forces rifles. But Wallenstadt has a bunch of them and has them mounted to their core rifles. Now the Wallenstadt rifles, generally they are being used for force on force training, but for guard duty or to qualify on the 300 meter range, you have your personal rifle ready. So you don't have to go switch back and forth and re-zero the laser designator every time you remount it. The sling itself is a sort of quick adjustable bungee sling. In the front, it is mounted to the regular sling loop with a piece of paracord. Then we have the bungee section of the sling. We have a sort of quick adjust buckle. It is kind of quick adjustable, not very, at least with my body type. If I wear the sling, that buckle is kind of behind me, so in order to adjust it, especially to loosen it, it's kind of a hassle. So technically quick adjustable, but not as ergonomic as a modern fighting rifle sling. Then we have a relatively wide, it's not a padded section, it's just a wider section to distribute the weight a bit more, but there's no padding. And then in the back we have 2 more adjustable buckles, and one is generally looped around the upper part of the stock. The problem is it is commercially available, it's just really expensive. In Switzerland you pay like $170 for a sling that's worse in every way than a $30 sling from Magpul or Savotta. So as an actual rifle, fighting rifle, there's no reason to buy a Kastinger sling. But if you want to clone a core rifle, it's the way to go. Again, it's not my personal sling. Over Instagram I found someone who was willing to borrow that to me, so thank you very much for you as well. So what is my opinion on either a personal rifle or a core rifle of the Swiss military, the Stgw 90? Generally, I like the rifle. It's very reliable, except for the charging handle that is now bit by bit being replaced. There's nothing really that breaks on the gun. It holds up to a lot of abuse from conscripts who generally do not care about guns, and it's actually surprising how well the rifle holds up to that kind of abuse. The other pro of the rifle is it's quite accurate. Yes, it's an iron-sighted rifle from the 80s, but it does literally everything it can for you to help you make hits. The trigger is really good, the sights for what they are really good, easy to use and very easy to fine adjust. Since it's relatively heavy, there's basically no recoil to it, so it's really easy to shoot and really easy to teach beginners or people who have no experience with guns how to shoot this rifle. Now the cons, obviously, with 1 meter with the extended stock, it is quite long. It has a 20-inch barrel. It's the same issue as the M16. It's just too long for close combat, for work inside of vehicles and stuff like that. On top of that, due to its gas system and the way it's constructed, it's quite front heavy as well. Most of the weight is on the front of the rifle, so it's just kind of cumbersome to operate in. It's not easy to handle. Honestly, what I see the biggest issue with is the lack of modernization. If you're stuck with iron sights when all the rest of the world has long transitioned to at least red dots on all their rifle, and we are stuck with iron sights for 4 out of 8 people in an infantry squad, it's insane. Fighting at night without a way of passive aiming nowadays is insane. So my biggest gripe with the gun is just the lack, not necessarily the gun itself, just the lack of investment that has been done by the government, by the military into this rifle. It would have a lot of potential, but you need an optic. Handguards and all that stuff, yeah, especially now with the Akron handguard, with the Akron rail, you can improve that. Biggest issue though, optics. So that has been my video about cloning a Stgw 90. I hope you could learn something today. If you already have a PE90 and try to clone a Stgw 90, tell me in the comments, how did you do it? I hope it was interesting for you. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you again sometime in the next Rifleman's Corner or maybe in a match video. Bye.